Lately, I have been subjected to a course on the environment and global warming, and it was quite enlightening, not on the realities of the climate crisis itself, but on the way that modern environmentalism works. Therefore, I have decided to write a short essay about the utterly dysfunctional way that most environmentalists think about their central issue, and how this somewhat resembles the German mindset towards the end of the Second World War. Disclaimer. This essay is not about debunking global warming. That has been done to death by people who are far more qualified than I. Not to mention that I find the whole practice of nitpicking overly long research papers to be quite uninteresting. What I do find interesting is the way that most people engage with this emerging topic in my classroom and in the wider political sphere. There, I do believe that I have something interesting to say, but for the purposes of this essay, I will accept the current consensus that the world temperature has been rising due to an increase of CO2. In the course, there were essentially two sides. One was the energetic environmentalist professor, and the second was the generally disinterested students, who spent the classes scrolling TikTok, but when called to, were always ready to answer with the correct platitudes that the teacher wanted to hear. We've all heard them. We need to drive and travel less. We should separate our trash and the like. However, I do know for a fact that none of these people put their words into actions. Indeed, this class was characterized by the sheer amount of apathy and hypocrisy that was to be found everywhere. They did not take the whole conversation seriously, much to the professor's despair. The fact that most of the students were goofing off was not surprising. This happens in most courses. But despite my best efforts, I could not overcome this apathy myself. This was by far the most unengaging course I've ever taken, which is strange since the topic should be interesting. It involves the economy, geopolitics, and geography. However, I believe that this is the result of the unserious way that modern environmentalism approaches its own topic. Most of the proposed solutions are not well thought out, and neither is their social and economic impact, so the desire to actually engage seriously with the topic was greatly reduced. For example, the poor countries that are industrializing are the ones that produce most of the global CO2 output. Should we stop their industrialization and keep them poor? How effective is reducing your own country's emissions and crippling your economy when India raises their emissions by 10 times that amount in the same time? So far, I have heard very few coherent responses from the environmentalists to these very real problems. There are two general approaches that environmentalists take to these difficult dilemmas. A minority of them are in favor of deindustrialization. We will call them hippies. And the great majority are in favor of technological solutions and a managerial approach. Let's call them Greens. The hippie proposal of full-on deindustrialization is plainly stupid and generally unpopular, but if anything, it is honest, and one has to respect the commitment of some of these hippies that actually start an organic garden to become self-sufficient and produce like 100 grams of trash a month. But despite the clear sincerity in their convictions, it is completely unrealistic to apply to them, the real world. Let's say that the hippies actually managed to convince you to deindustrialize your country. Congratulations, your reward is geopolitical rape. When a deindustrialized nation has an industrial neighbor, it will find itself in a powerless state, to be exploited, colonized, or outright conquered. No one has ever won money by betting on decency on the international stage. It is no wonder that such proposals are unpopular, but the reason that the hippies are so adamant in their ways is that the intersection of history nerds with tree-hugging hippies is indeed small. And therefore there's a lot of ignorance on geopolitical matters. But by far their biggest obstacle is that they stand against consumerism, and woe to he who stands between the masses and their Funko Pops. However, this essay is far more concerned with the majority of the movement, whom we have denominated as Greens. Most of the environmental parties and green advocacy groups are part of this faction, including my dear professor. They are far less radical and are far more talented at politics. This is because they know how to sell their ideology well. They focus on the use of technology to bring forth a society that is both able to not contaminate and to live in prosperity. This is the implicit message that is behind every single ad about a company being environmentally friendly, and behind every campaign to promote clean energy or electric cars. Let us not forget that politics is the art of marketing and of selling a vision. And what is there not to like about this vision? A world where everybody lives in a rich and technologically advanced society that does not have to hurt baby polar bears and does not depend on the finite oil deposits of Saudi Arabia to pollute our air, while, at the same time, living in luxury and having a cool electric car. This vision is attractive, and it is the reason that environmental causes are so popular. The problem, however, is the same one that was clearly seen in my university course itself. This political vision is not grounded in reality because reality will inevitably complicate anything, and it will make it harder to sell your nice little vision. Simply put, the Greens have no clear plan to create a society that is completely ecologically friendly and at the same time keeps a high material standard of living. These two promises that stand at the center of their movement are fundamentally contradictory. You cannot have the level of consumerism and material comfort that we enjoy today and not consume fossil fuels, output a lot of CO2, and create millions of tons of trash. Many of the nations that have been spending the past few decades chasing these two objectives simultaneously are beginning to realize this. If you change from combined cycle power generation to using solar and wind power, you will undoubtedly have a much higher energy cost, which will of course hurt the industrial sector of any economy. Not to mention that the cost of ecologically friendly products is much higher, and that this will be reflected in higher costs and a decreasing quality of life in any countries where the Greens actually achieve power. When looked at from this lens, the environmentalist movement is doomed because they, in my opinion, cannot achieve both of their goals. In this situation, the movement must choose between capitulating one of their two promises. Either they stay true to their environmentalist convictions, and this translates into inevitably lowering the population's quality of life. But of course, the other option to causing massive economic damage is that they must become complete hypocrites and capitulate the protection of the environment, the second that it interferes with the economic comfort of the population. The hippies in the movement have committed themselves to the first option and have consciously given up the material comforts of mass industrial production in favor of Mother Earth. While the Greens have so far dealt with this dilemma by looking the other way and pretending that there actually are no contradictions between their promises. But I do believe that the Greens have a strategy. They clearly see that the choice between economic prosperity and environmental protection is a clear case of lose-lose, of political suicide. So they quite astutely do not choose, and instead they look for a way out of their slippery situation. Their solution is to delay the choice between the economy and the environment and invest in technology to the point that new technologies will be able to save them from their terrible dilemma. This seems like the only way out. Indeed, it might be possible to reconcile both of their interests with the help of new technologies such as electric cars, improved solar panels, automatization, artificial intelligence, and fusion energy. Being in an impossible situation and relying completely on new technologies to save the day is nothing new. It has already happened a couple times in history, most famously in Germany towards the end of the Second World War, where the mustache man's last resort to win the war was the production of technologically advanced superweapons that returned the war back on their favor. Out of these efforts came some of the most important innovations of the time, such as the first operational jet airplanes and the Me-262 and the Arado 234. as well as great advances in rocketry with the V1 and V2 programs that eventually led to getting Armstrong on the moon with the help of Operation Paperclip. There was also another myriad of deranged or brilliant projects that were the result of the Wunderwaffe program, such as the first assault rifle or great advances in helicopters. But in the end, most of these programs failed completely or achieved only minor successes because of the drastic situation towards the end of the war. What good is having the first jet fighter if you have no fucking fuel? However, although most of these weapons were a huge waste of resources for little gain, it is still very interesting to see the political and propagandistic side of these developments. These technologies and projects became important propaganda tools to reassure the population that the war was still winnable despite the famine, the carpet bombing, and a very, very angry Red Army coming in from the east. The interesting thing is the over-reliance on technology in order to get out of a terrible situation with no good options. In my opinion, this sort of derangement comes from the fact that our whole civilization hinges on technology to solve almost all of our problems. We use technology to fix our health problems, our transportation, our environment, our entertainment, food production, pretty much anything, etc. The real challenge is to name a problem that we have not tried to solve through technology. So I think that it is perfectly understandable that whenever our modern civilization is faced with an impossible problem, such as having a prosperous first world country and not contaminating, or losing World War II, our only solution are the wonders of technology that will make this problem go away. And hey, maybe in the next couple of years there will be a technological breakthrough that will completely enable there to be prosperous, rich, and completely eco-friendly countries, and everybody will live happily ever after. But maybe not. Maybe there are some problems that we cannot solve through technology alone. And here I think that I can draw a fair comparison between the situation of the environmentalist movement right now and the Nazis at the end of the war. They both rely on some marvelous new technology to save them. In the meantime, they both refuse to actually face their seemingly insurmountable problems. We know that this did not work out for the Germans. They lost the war and their scientists just got cushy new jobs at NASA. But in the end, the Wunderwaffe program was a failure. The question is still open on what will happen with the future of the environmentalist movement. But I am convinced that if there is no amazing technological breakthrough, they will have to face their terrible dilemma. Either they will be hated because they are hypocrites, or because they lived up to their values and sacrificed a good part of the economy in the name of the planet. Either way, it is political suicide. Perhaps I am being dramatic in making this comparison. Maybe I just wanted to have a cool title for this essay. But even if these two scenarios do have different levels of severity, since political failure is not the same thing as death by hanging, I am convinced that it is still a fair comparison because it is the same principle of putting all your hopes into some wondrous new technology that will save your problems. The position of not choosing and pretending that there is no problem since technology will solve it cannot survive long if there is no Wunderwaffe. Since I am a pessimist, I do not think that this will happen, and that the future of the environmentalist movement, therefore, will belong to the honest and austere hippies that are willing to choose the environment over the economy and put up with the consequences, even if they will probably never reach political success by promising deindustrialization. But also, I would be optimistic when it comes to the future of environmentalism, since it is a political force that cannot really go extinct and that will always have some power because everybody finds some beauty in nature, and many also feel pride in the rivers, plains, and forests of their native land. Of course, these emotions can be easily translated into a powerful drive to protect nature from our destructive incursions and search for resources to make even more new shiny products. So, although I believe that the current environmentalist movement is kind of doomed, I still believe that the cause of protecting nature from over-industrialization is something that will endure, and something that I, personally, hold very close to heart. But this essay is at an end, and there will be another essay where I talk more about my own views on environmentalism and my deep appreciation for my local forest. Thank you for your time.